What we have today is a study on the foraging interactions amongst mixed species of avian bird groups for human-provided food over a rural-urban gradient. The place we live in, Sydney, has been exposed to rapid urbanisation over the years, and in turn has significantly influenced the wild bird species behaviour as human interaction becomes increasingly prevalent. This study aims to A. Identify and measure agnostic inter- and intra-species interactions in mixed species groups of birds foraging for human-provided foods. B. Identify differences in feeding styles and behaviours among species. And C. Compare groups along a rural-urban gradient to see if urbanisation is associated with group foraging behaviours. We know that urban birds have different ecological characteristics to closely related non-urban species. This includes developed habituation towards human interactions, allowing higher rates of feeding and foraging innovation. These ecological differences are what allows the birds to succeed in urban environments by allowing them to avoid unnecessary energetic costs and maximise sources of food. The habituation towards humans is a measure determined to allow the possible advantages of urban birds over the rural. The constant exposure and forced interactions with both the urban environment and humans has resulted in increased feeding exposures as well as exposing the birds to a greater variety of selection pressures. On the other hand, the rural birds are believed to act in the opposite manner to the urban bird species. Rural environments are exposed to less urbanisation, being further away from the city. Having a greater area allows the bird species to spread out further, allowing specific areas for specific species. The rural birds are also exposed to less human interactions, so the possibility of rural birds to approach humans is less likely. By providing bird feed at both urban and rural areas, we record the birds' interactions with each other and analyse the recording after. This way, we can determine the effect of urbanisation on the birds or the fact that living in urban areas is no different from rural areas. Within each area, we had 10 recordings to analyse using Boris. The video recording lengths of birds averaged 63.5 seconds. During this time frame, we looked at species-specific foraging styles by recording the feeding rates, agnostic behaviour frequencies, and locomotive duration. A total of 5 species were recorded, which were pigeons, miners, magpies, ibis, and seagulls. A total of 14 out of 20 sites had pigeons. Firstly, we found that there was indeed a difference in behaviour for birds between urban and rural areas. The number of inter- and intra-species interactions for urban environments was significantly greater than rural environments. Urban birds had a total of 11.9 interactions for both inter- and intra-species, whereas rural had 1.1. By conducting an ANOVA test on agnostic interactions, the results attained had been significant, with the p-value being less than 0.05, with a value of 0.002. In terms of interspecific agnostic interactions, it can be seen that there was none for rural groups, but 19 in urban groups. With this data, we satisfy our first aim, which was to identify and measure agnostic interactions. In terms of feeding styles between species, the pigeons had the greatest feeding rate at an average of 45 pecks per minute, whereas the other species overall averaged only 6.86 pecks per minute. The difference is most likely due to the greater population size for pigeons within the recorded areas. Though, when accounting for the differences in environments, only the pigeons and miners were examined, as they were the only species to be found in both the rural and urban environments. In rural areas, birds averaged 30 pecks per minute, as opposed to urban areas which averaged 35 pecks per minute. The increased feeding rate shows that there is more competition within urban areas. These results satisfy our second and third aim in that the different feeding styles and behaviours has been identified, and that the two groups were compared between rural and urban gradient to determine if urbanisation has an effect on bird species. It can be concluded that urbanisation has an extensive effect on bird species, in that it increases both inter- and intra-species agnostic interactions, as well as differences in behaviours like feeding rates. Rural areas had lower numbers in terms of feeding rates, but spent more time walking around, while non-rural and urban areas showed the opposite.